words from the chairperson saying that this is a glaring invitation for litigation, saying you've never seen a more spectacular mess-up of the process.
Thank you so much, Thabo, for having me, and my greetings to the viewers at home. Indeed it is, but this is DA style of arrogance, no respect of law unless it suits them. And it's clearly a way to undermine the sovereignty of South Africa, even our digital sovereignty, to bring in entities like Starlink, as you heard in the White House, as if they're coming to solve our issues of crime. The failures that was created by the very president who was sitting there and his party, the failure to protect our borders, the failure to curb crime, and now we want to get an American technology to come and resolve it. And in so doing, we must bend our own legislations, regulations, and our Electronic Communications Act to do so. Totally unnecessary. The South African government can, with the will and with the right skill, meet rural connectivity. We've got the budget over the last 20 years, over 10 billion and more has been spent on rural connectivity. But the corruption of the ANC and now the GNU has made it impossible for us to roll out those. We've got CETA, we've got Centec, we've got Broadband Infraco, USASA, all being funded annually by government to provide rural connectivity. So what is the point of Elon Musk? We've got satellite operators here in South Africa, who some of them are complying to the BEE regulations, historically disadvantaged ownership of those entities. We've got drones that are here in South Africa that are operating, some on the unlicensed band. So what is really the issue? The issue is not that we are lacking technology. They want to bring Starlink because it's in line with number one, the
would
bigger
argue that
picture.
there's nothing explicitly in the regulation that speaks of Starlink. And it's his words to saying it's to bring in more than just shareholding as a way of unlocking investment, because it's equity, as he put it, equivalent investment programs is part of what we have in place in South Africa.
Equity equivalent has been around since Minister Alec Erwin in the time of President Mbeki. They introduced equity equivalent because we did not yet have regulations. The Electronic Communications Act now, as it stands, it was not yet so. The ICT Charter was not yet so. The BE regulations. That was to allow multinationals to go into a village and, let me say Microsoft, for instance, they want to come and implement their system, which they've done. Then they go into a village and put in a borehole. They're going to a village and train 10, 20 young people. Where has that gotten us? Who today owns Microsoft? Which black child, which black family can say, I'm part of Huawei, I'm part of Oracle? The IP is gone, it's not sustainable. We cannot always have this equity equivalent running away from meaningful ownership and control. And that's how transformation is done. Countries like India have pushed back on Starlink. And even Kenya, Nigeria have pushed back on multinationals that are coming to continually rape the resources of the country in exchange for some equity. It's happening in land as well. Instead of giving us land, they want to give us equivalents of some townhouses somewhere there, informal settlement. No, the whole shenanigan of the White House was about land ownership and economic ownership and control. And if we don't take control of those levers now, will forever be at the mercy of multinationals. Go and check now. Let the Minister of DTI, in fact, is next that we're going to call in line in the committee. He must give us a list of multinationals like Huawei, Oracle, Microsoft. Tell us those equity equivalents, what have they done to our community? Where is the transformation?
I'm interested in what you are demanding here as far as your letter is concerned. You can tell me where the contradictions are as far as the laws. But one, immediate suspension of Regulation 17.8 to prevent further harm to South Africa's transformative goals and digital sovereignty. We'll talk about that. But you want full disclosure of the stakeholders consulted. Why?
Because this is a unilateral act of the Democratic Alliance, and the minister is just a pawn, unfortunately, who's been tossed aside by Helen Zille and everybody in charge. So
that whole cabinet would not have been consulted on the drafting of this regulation?
No, they were not. If they were, we would know who was consulted, and the committee would have known. We want to see that list of everybody who was consulted, what was their response, where did they hold the public hearings for this, which local SMMEs were involved, which local ICT players, industry champions were involved. Where did he get this mandate to even start this whole gazette of 17.8? This whole thing, it's malicious in its nature because it is supposed to undermine the transformation agenda and targets that are required specifically in the ICT sector for now. And if we don't curb it here, Thabo, this is just the beginning. Next, we're going to go to manufacturing, we're going to go to mining, because the DA just does not want empowerment. They don't want local ownership. A black person must not own any industry. They must not be involved economically and prosper economically. They must not own land. That's really what this is all about.
Well, it's good and well, but we are saying the investors must put their money where their mouth is. It's not just in ownership where they can put that. They can put that in skills development. They can put that in infrastructure development. You've already mentioned rural connectivity, saying this is another area where they can put their money in, funding local SMMEs.
We have enough money, enough budget in this country, as I told you, to do local rural connectivity. If investors are coming, they must do it on our own terms. They must comply with the laws of the nation. We can't always be 30 years after the fact, be bending over, and there is no meaningful transformation for the black child in this country. Rural connectivity is budgeted for by the National Treasury. I'll tell you now, as I speak, broadband infraco, Centec, the DCDT, they've got budgets of over 1.3 billion as I speak now to do rural connectivity. Why are they not doing that? We're employing over 6,000 people across the departments of the digital communications and technologies. What are those people doing on a daily basis? They were meant to go and provide universal access. USAF sits with over 2 billion rand now. Yeah. That is meant for rural connectivity. USASA itself, over 500 million for rural connectivity. Why are we not? It's not lack of money, it's not lack of technology, it's just lack of capacity on the ANC. It's just the corruption that is rampant.
So the chairperson points the CETA Act as one of the contradictions, certainly opening up for litigation. You've cited at least 4 more contradictions of the legal framework in the country. Talk to me about them.
The ICASA Act, for instance, Section 4, does not allow for what the minister is doing. The trumping provision in the BEE Act itself does not allow for what the minister is doing. And if there's any conflict between any legislation which is reciting CETA Section 23, if it conflicts with the BEE Act, the BEE Act takes precedence, it prevails. Even the the EC Act, the Electronic Communications Act, Section 9, it conflicts what the minister is doing. He can't do a regulation in an attempt to amend an act. The act is superior to those minor regulations that he's trying to do. Perhaps, I don't know, they may have received some flawed legal advice, but whatever he's doing, he's truly opened himself up for litigation, and it's a direct result of the Oval Office meeting that happened, that disgraceful meeting that did nothing but to tell South Africa and the world how we are barbaric, we're slitting people's throat, how we are raping women over and over again, there's crime, and therefore we need some Starlink technology to come and help us. It's a total, complete lie. They went there to say there's genocide, therefore bring Starlink to stop genocide. It's a total, complete lie. Why they didn't have the bravery? The president of this nation could not tell the nation there is no genocide in South Africa. He could not tell the nation that in America, there's black genocide happening daily. Black men are being shot, they are being imprisoned. Every day we hear black men dying. They can't breathe in America. Did we ever cry black genocide come to Africa? It's a total disgrace. They could not stand and defend the nation, and our policies, domestic policies, cannot be sacrificed for the sake of AGOA, for the sake of white billionaires, for the sake of those that want to continually oppress us, take our land and our economy, and we must be left with nothing as the indigenous people of this land.
There are those in the Democratic Alliance, certainly, who believe that this is leveling the playing field. It's not just for Starlink, it's for other players in the satellite space that can certainly also come in and play a role.
We already have players in the satellite space in South Africa. SES, ULETSEF, UNETSET, you can name them, a whole lot of them. That are playing in the space. Who are they leveling for? That is a question. Who specifically do they want to level the playing space for? Because over the years, the past 20, 30 years, even Centec provides satellite. We have the technology here. It is not lack of technology. Elon Musk is not providing anything unique. It's not an innovative thing that is not available anywhere else in the world. Whatever he's bringing here, we already have it here in the country. We've got local players that are doing it. Even some multinationals that have come in here, respected our domestic laws and complied. There's nothing special that must be done.
So you are...
At least it gives you another option, you know, and it's a cheaper one that could be useful to you. And we've seen the Independent Communications Authority of South Africa, that being ICASA, raising concern before about Starlink. How likely is that company, how likely is it that Starlink gets full regulatory approval to operate here? What could the delay be?
Well, the regulations will dictate what Starlink has to comply with, and what it will allow for is equity equivalence. In other words, Starlink will be required to invest in infrastructure or skills in this country, much like the big players like Microsoft and Amazon and Google have had to do up to now. The current ICT sector rules require that kind of investment as opposed to giving away a share of the business. And the telecom sector was in fact out of step with what was happening in the general information and communication technology sector. So this brings it into step with that sector, and it allows then for ICASA to give them a license on the basis of that equity equivalence. ICASA has to abide by a policy directive. So if the policy directive is issued and the law is changed, ICASA has to abide by that, and they simply have to require.
And you're wondering why we don't have Starlink yet, even though it's available in other countries. Everyone online is saying it's because of BEE, and that the government is so corrupt that they won't allow us to have fast and affordable internet unless they can get a piece of the pie. Let me explain the real reason we don't want Starlink here. It's not because of BEE. It's about national security. Starlink isn't just an internet service provider. It's a monopoly owned by a billionaire from the United States of America. If Starlink is allowed into the country without proper regulation, it will destroy local internet service providers. And once Starlink becomes the only ISP in South Africa, we'll be in serious trouble. Imagine one company, one American company, controlling internet access across our entire country. The next time we say something the US doesn't like, or if we take a political position they don't agree with, such as taking Israel to court for genocide, they will shut down our internet. If you don't believe me, look what happened to Ukraine. They have Starlink, and when negotiations over critical mineral resources were not favoring the Americans, one of the threats that the USA brought to the table was to shut down Ukraine's internet access. If you hate Eskom's load shedding, imagine if we had an internet blackout every time Elon Musk throws a tantrum. So ask yourself this: why would any responsible government hand over the nation's internet access to a foreign private company? No country which is serious about its future would ever do something like that. BEE compliance is just an excuse. The real reason we don't want Starlink here is because we actually want to remain a sovereign country. So no, it's not about protecting corrupt government officials or blocking competition. It's about not being stupid enough to give the US government a kill switch to our digital economy.